Today's episode comes to you from Keene, New Hampshire, where we meet with Kaisa Gerald of the Green Wagon Farm. Kaisa has been managing the farm since 2013, however, grew up on the farm, so she's been in ag since about the age of 4. Green Wagon is a 20-acre vegetable farm in the Zone 5B, with fields in both Surrey and Keene. They sell most of their produce out of their farm stand, with some sales going to a local food co-op. Kaisa, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So today we wanted to talk about weed mat and how you use it on your farm. So if you could tell me a little bit about it, what is weed mat?
It's essentially a landscape fabric that has been, it's the width of a row. So, like the walking space between rows of your crops. And so you put that weed mat down the length of your row, um, and it suppresses weeds without having to mechanically cultivate or use herbicide or just endless amount of hand hoeing. It's been a total game changer, really.
So it's the pain points that it's addressing is not needing to weed,
Yes,
which which is wonderful. I hate weeding.
me too.
Do you have to weed the edges at all, or
Yeah, I mean,
overlap enough?
sometimes the spacing in between beds isn't exact, and there is like a little bit of a gap sometimes. Along the edges where I mean, if weeds have a place to grow, they will grow. Don't we know that? But for the most part, it really just eliminates, 90 plus percent of the weeds in your walking space. And also, the weed mat is secured in place with metal staples. I've heard of other firms also using sandbags, which that could obviously work too. We've just used the staples, and we tie a brightly colored string to every staple, just so we don't lose them. Because the other nice thing about the weed mat is that it can be reused for many years, so it really cuts down on waste as well.
That's a good tip. Tying now, do you tie a string to each staple, or do you tie all the staples to like one long string?
An individual string to each staple.
Okay.
Yep. And we figured out this year too that that's not a bad job for the stand crew when there's downtime in between customers. um, and it's mostly so we don't lose the staple because the metal staples sitting in the ground for months. It rusts. It might break down. It might just get lost entirely. So you don't want to start cultivating the next year and have that puncture a tractor tire, or if you're walking along like stepping on it. I mean, there's a myriad of things that could go wrong. So just tying that string to it is helpful.
Is that
um,
a nylon string you're using so it doesn't break down throughout the season?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
We've used bright orange. We've also used blue, just something that's like not a natural color, is the most
Natural
helpful.
attraction.
Yeah.
How long of a tail do you leave hanging off?
Try and leave it fairly long just so that, it makes for easy tying, and just so that it's noticeable. But like about 6-inch tail, maybe a little bit more.
Does that string make it easier to remove too?
Yes. Yes, it does. So it's multifunctional.
Yeah. I was just pulling some up the other day and thinking how I was gonna bend a nail even wearing gloves,
Yep.
trying to dig them up.
Mhm.
That's a good tip, thanks.
Yeah. I think it was my dad that thought of that a few years ago, and it's been helpful.
Nice. How far apart are you, putting staples?
It's not an exact science. Maybe, I don't know, 6 to 8 feet. It just depends. Um,
Yeah.
it's you got to find that sweet spot between, making sure that the mat is secured, but then also like using appropriate amount of staples, like not too little, not too much. My dad also bought an attachment that goes on the tractor that helps wind it up at the end of the season so you can put it away nicely. I unfortunately I don't know what that thing is called. But it hooks up to like the PTO and it just winds winds up the fabric because I mean how do you wind up that large of a piece of fabric that goes like the length of a row? Um,
Yeah, that's um, a great point. So do you just walk along, pull up the staples, and then it's loose, and then you turn on the tractor and it sucks it up?
yep, yep. And we've figured out that we use like PVC pipe to like wind it up on. We like sort of tape it to the piece of PVC pipe and then wind it up on the tractor from there. Also, the other handy thing is that on that pipe, you can write the approximate length of the weed mat, so that's also handy when you start laying things out the next season.
How long are your rows?
It varies a lot. I mean, I think some of them could be like 175 feet long, some of them are less. Um, so that's a lot of material.
Yeah. And so in the spring, how are you deploying these?
you stick it right back on the same machine that you wound it up on, so you're able
And then
to
pull it out.
unwind it. Yep, yep.
You mentioned that it helps with harvesting too. How is weed mat beneficial for harvesting?
It keeps everything so much cleaner, uh, and you're just not battling the weeds as you're walking along. But mainly, I mean, it just you don't get the splash up. Like if it was to rain, the dirt doesn't splash up onto the produce because it's hitting that plastic material. It's really nice to walk through a row and not be just inundated with knee high or taller weeds.
Yeah, you said it takes care of about 90% of the weeds. What are you doing with the other 10%? Are you addressing them or just kind of like not worrying about it?
It depends on where they are and, maybe what kind of weed it is. Um, but if I'm moving along and I see a weed that I could definitely pull up without issue, I'll just yank it. But I'm not going to go through every single row and do that. It's just not worth the time.
Yeah, right. If you are weeding, do you just leave it right there in the aisleway, or do you carry it off to keep your carpets clean?
So the nice thing too about the carpets is that if it's pretty smooth surface, I've actually taken a push broom and just swept the row off because so you can just drop the weeds and then after you go through with a push broom and just clean them out of there. So that's nice too.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. Um, when you roll them up at the end of the season, do they hold a lot of dirt and debris, or do they roll up pretty clean?
Yeah, some. I as far as I know, I don't think there's much of a cleaning process with that. Um, but again, like they're so effective at blocking the weeds that that's not as much of an issue.
You obviously are a big fan of this weed mat. What are some negatives, or have you had an instance where using this has gone completely wrong?
You can have problems in terms of like if you're not careful with making sure that the mat is tight up against the space, the width of the row. So that's where you get like those 2 or 3 inch gaps on either side, and you get tons of weeds coming up. I believe last year we did that in our watermelons, and you could tell the row that was done properly versus the row that wasn't done quite as meticulously. But other than that, I mean, it's a pretty foolproof tool. And again, just not having to mechanically weed or use herbicide is always a good thing to eliminate.
Do you pick up all the weed mat at the end of the season, or are there instances where you might leave some down?
We pretty much pick everything up. I don't think we've ever. Oh, actually, no, we did. I think we left some weed mats down in some of our young strawberries one year. I think it just helped like suppress the weeds prior to pulling back the straw. Or, sometimes things just don't get pulled up because it snows or what have you. So there is that as well. But for the most part, it's all just packed and put away and all ready for the spring.
Is there anything particular you have to do special to store these, or just throw them in a pile and in a stack?
We try and throw them in a somewhat neat pile. That doesn't always happen, of course, but yeah, winding it up tightly is really good, and then marking about what length it is helpful as well. So as you're putting them away, you can kind of group them into size categories. But yeah, it's a valuable tool.
One last question: where do you get it, and what's it cost?
We get it from Knowles primarily. My dad buys a lot of our farm materials down in Pennsylvania. It gives him a chance to get out of town, but also save some money on materials.
Kaisa wasn't sure the cost of this material, so I looked it up online from Knowles Produce Supplies, and they've got two different options for black woven ground cover. One is popular as a weed barrier between rows of plastic mulch, same as the black ground cover above, except lighter weight. So the lighter weight one you can get in 3 or 4 foot widths. The 3-foot width is $115 for a 1,200 foot roll. And then they make one that is a little bit thicker, and that comes in 3, 4, or 6 feet widths, and each of those rolls are 300 feet long. The 3 foot wide by 300 foot long roll is $38.50. Now back to the conversation.
I mean, the nice thing that I can just add to that is that it is reusable. So again, like if you're cutting back on your weeds with, just sort of a one-time covering, it really does save you a lot in the grand scheme of things as you use that material year to year. And we, other than like adding more weed mats to our arsenal, I don't think we've had to get rid of any of ours yet, and we've been using it for 3 or 4 years now. So
that's awesome.
That's pretty valuable to know as well.
I know a lot of people are mindful about how much plastic they're using and bringing onto their farm, and that's one thing to keep in mind, that at least it's something that you can reuse over and over again, and it's not just annual waste. So that's a plus, at least.
Yes. And I always, sometimes in thinking about using plastic mulch, I do worry about that, but it also just, it's like weighing the pros and cons. Using plastic mulch reduces weeds. It holds more moisture so that you're not using as much water. I think there's way more pros to using it than negatives. But yeah, it is nice to be able to reuse something.
Is there anything else about weed mat that we haven't brought up?
Don't think so.
Well, if others want to see you or your farm, and how should they follow up and check you out?
So we have a website. That's www.thegreenwagonfarm.com. We're on Instagram. That's at The Green Wagon Farm. And then we're also on Facebook as well. Just Green Wagon Farm. Make sure it's the one in Keene. So we're very social. Otherwise, I'd just come down to the stand. We're open 7 days a week, at least until, October or so. So come on down.
There you go. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you learned something today or plan to make a change on your farm, let me know. I'd love to receive any feedback you have. Just click the link in the description to submit the form. It will help the future of this podcast to be a resource that is helpful for you. And while you're at it, I hope you go ahead and subscribe, share this with a friend, or leave a comment. And if you want more information, check out the show notes on our website at agengpodcast.com. That's agengpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a great day.
The proceeding has been a production of University of Vermont Extension. For more information on Extension, log on to www.uvm.edu/extension.